occupy the empty seats, we are going to start with the event now, the discussion for which most of you are here. I know food and drinks are always attractive too. So to start with, we have our panelists here. I'm Ruchi. I'm from Hitech Advisors. Many of you know us. We are a team of experts who help our businesses bring their tech ideas to life, whether it is about building software or creating a product roadmap or helping them scale their teams, building IT operations for them. We have worked with many of our clients in startup domains and mid-sector companies. We have also supported foundations like Gates Foundation. We have dealt with all projects related to whether it's about building scalable solutions or working on mobile applications or even embedded software, worked on various clouds, all the major cloud platforms, GCP, Azure, AWS. I'm not going to bore you here. I know if you want to learn more, you can always come to us. I just wanted to share this in terms of if you're wondering what makes us apart. It's basically what I always feel is we are not just a service provider. We are a partner to your company, to your team. We take the time to understand what's your pain point, what's your problem. We try to create a solution or provide the solution which is very specific to you. And it's also very scalable, highly affordable. And we are able to do this with our team of experts because we have our in-house experts and we also have our trusted partners, which gives us the flexibility to work on projects of various complexities and various size. We are proud in terms of we are experts at engaging experts for our clients, and we like to map meaningful problems to people who find them meaningful to solve. So if there is any problem that you are working on, or if you feel like there is someone who could use some help in any of their tech solutions, you can definitely reach out to me or any of our team members. And I know we are here for our experts and panels today. I'll hand it over to Haresh to introduce us and have the introductions, and we'll all have an amazing evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchi. So I guess the funnest part of my job, I'm Haresh, most of you probably know me, is thanking David and Camille for the food and drinks. So JP Morgan Chase has been a partner of ours in these events for, I think, going on 2 years now, David. It's a long time, so we appreciate the partnership. I'm not sure if you guys wanted to say anything about the team of wealth management in JP Morgan Private Bank.
Hi, everyone. David Kurtman. I think I know a lot of you, and we've been doing this for 2 years now. But I just want to say thank you. I mean, this is one of the most engaging events that I sponsor. I mean, the panelists are always top-notch. We've been talking AI for 2 years, way ahead of the curve. Hopefully, we all invested in AI stocks at the beginning of it. I know I did. But yeah, so me and Camille, we work with individuals across the Pacific Northwest, primarily in the tech space. Camille actually runs we call our founders and funders vertical, which focuses on venture-backed early-stage companies, all the way from seed stage all the way to pre-IPO. And also covering venture funds across the Pacific Northwest and their GPs. So she does a great job leading. I'm working with her on that team. And we are just here in this ecosystem as a resource. You know, we just started our startup banking division in the business bank. We have commercial banking, the innovation economy. We have investment banking working on AI and tech. You know, our private bank is focused on this space. So we're putting the resources there. If you guys need anything, whether it's wealth management, whether it's business banking, whether it's just advice, just think of us as a partner in this ecosystem. And thank you, Haresh. This has been great so far.
Thank you, David. Thanks again for the great resource, by the way. Any questions or anything you have, either as founders or investors or whatnot, I highly recommend reaching out to David and company. So, well, with that, we'll go to the main part of the discussion or the event tonight. So I have three volunteers. highly knowledgeable in the domain of AI and CX. And so thank you for your time and, making it out here tonight. So I'm going to just ask for introductions, and then we'll get into some Q&A, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end with the audience. So Curtis, since you're right next to me, go ahead, start us.
Hi, I'm Curtis Stevens. I head up product consumer insights at Tinder. That's consumer research, user experience research, and experience strategy. I've been there for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I won't go too deep. Prior to that, I was at Qualtrics for 4.5 years and ran implementations in North America and advised clients on how to build or improve their CX programs. And then prior to that, I worked at Amazon. The first half, I worked in Amazon Media Group back when it was a little tiny advertising shop. Helped build the first ad server. And then the second half of my time, I spent running customer experience strategy for third-party sales at Amazon. Most notably, the first breakthrough we had there, one of the bigger ones, was when we realized that both consumers and sellers were both customers at Amazon. And so that helped change our strategy and shape the way we thought about our users and our customers. So,
Thank you. And where do the employees figure in? We can come back.
employee experience.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Monroe. I'm the managing partner at From the Culture. Can you guys hear me on this mic? Okay, great. Outside of that, I'm also a YouTube creator for the Come Up series, where I teach folks who look like me how to close the racial wealth gap within a generation by giving them financial literacy for free, and also bringing people like Dan Ives and other individuals to the conversation. What I do on the other side is my world has been startups, tech. One-time exit as a founder, one-time exit as a VC, reform VC, because I no longer do that anymore. But that's what led me to starting up my startup studio, where I get to focus on underrepresented founders and bringing them into the foray to help them build some pretty cool things.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kalyan Basu. I head up AI strategy at Qualtrics. I just joined Qualtrics last year. Prior to that, almost 20 years stint in Microsoft in various aspects of AI and research and products. Prior to that, I was in the academic space. I was an associate professor at IIT in India. And pretty much the last 7 or 8 years of my life has been deep immersion in AI. A lot of it outside of the LLM space, which tends to suck every oxygen atom out of the room. So and there is a lot of AI, a lot of goodness in that. And I kind of lived through many of the deaths and the rebirths of AI, and I'm looking for this to be a really long and successful innings. It seems to be headed that way. So looking forward to the discussion this evening.
Thank you. So we'll start with you, Kalyan. And a lot of buzz around AI, Gen AI specifically, right? And then for businesses, of course, customer experience is a very critical domain, right? Customers are probably their biggest or the highest priority audience. So I guess these days, anything that says AI or Gen AI, people automatically pay attention, probably because they're trying to figure out which stocks to pick. But when it comes to the substance level, right? What is the reason, or are the reasons we should be paying attention to AI, and also in the context of customer experience, right? Why is it critical?
What is Gen AI? Something like Gen X or Gen A or hey, just kidding. All right. So I think, a lot of people look at the current AI as a way for efficiencies. That's certainly one of the major pillars of doing it. But in my understanding, it's a lot more than that. And I think the lot more are basically 2 pillars. First, knowledge of almost everything. It's like if you're a customer to a brand, you got a very personal concierge that knows everything about both the brand and of you and the industry. So knowledge is one of the biggest thing that an AI has, which is practically infinite. It's of course finite in a physics sense, but it's practically infinite. So I think that's a really big part. It's not so much the efficiencies or the cost savings and stuff like that, but it's deep information and contextual knowledge. The other thing is deep personalization. Now, it has a lot of overlap with what I just said, but this is more about empathy. Actually, AI can be superbly empathetic. So I think these are the two potential gains from AI, which I must admit is really underexplored in today's current state of the art. And that's the stuff that we have to kind of take the frontiers forward to develop these in kind of a powerful way.
And in the context of customer experience, if you're in customer experience, must you be looking at AI today, or is it optional?
I don't think it's optional. I don't think it's optional anymore. If you're not looking at AI, not only I think you're missing out on something like an enormous wave of opportunity, but I think it's really kind of amortized investments. Like, you're not going to get the benefit or the return on that right away. But you're an early mover. You have to be an early mover, in my opinion, because you have to learn through that cycle. And there's a lot of hype in this cycle right now. But if you're an early mover, then you kind of, you attain adolescence in this way. And when you come out on the other side, you're a lot more mature because you've lived through these, the trough of the deflation and the hype of inflated expectations, to use, very old terminology.
Got it. Your thoughts, Mark, on the same?
Do you want me to attack it from AI or from I'll give you both. So I'll look at it from the standpoint of let's roll back the clock a little bit. I'll take one of the companies today that is widely talked about in the AI space. So let's take NVIDIA. So in this space, if we roll back the clock a while back, NVIDIA at the time was battling against, of course, its rival AMD within the cryptocurrency space. And cryptocurrency, as it pertains to mining and using graphics cards. And that was a significant need because, of course, they needed to solve significant computational problems in order to mine crypto. And NVIDIA they said, okay, hey, we want to get into the space. They failed in getting into the space. AMD succeeded. But what they learned from that customer experience was that the fact is that, hey, we have these super powered GPUs that we can utilize to not only solve just these computational problems to mine cryptocurrency, but they could be the genesis to solve a lot of other complex problems in which that their AI, they really started giving AI some significant thought as it pertains to, I think that's why, you probably hear Dan on CNBC say Godfather of AI is Jensen Huang, because of the fact that they took that step in paying attention to customer related experience. I think for me, where I get to sit at it, is an interesting level because I get to see it on the early stage side. And, customer experience or CX, it's not it has no way that it could be a feature if you're a startup and survive. It's just not going to happen. It's your business model. It's who you are. It's your DNA. Because when you create ideas, they come from customer related experiences in which that you spot areas or gaps within the market that are problems and which that we are looking to solve as entrepreneurs. And so when you think about that, that's a massive part of CX. When you think about how is it that you bring in your business model, or how is that you even create your business model around the product that you create, CX is there at the forefront. So to not think of that any other way, pretty much you're doing yourself a huge disservice. And ultimately, you'll probably just be between the 60 to 80% of startups that don't return value to portfolios.
Got it. I guess slightly different question for you. Okay, go ahead. If you wish. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I agree with that. I think that's really valuable feedback. For me, it's about identifying who your customers are, but also working backwards from them. That's a big Amazon thing too, right? But but it's also iterating on who your customers are, right? Because your customers are like, especially in a online dating space, right? Like our customer, the generation, the bucket is 18 to 24. That's where the sweet spot is, right? If you can crack that nut, they'll be loyal a little bit longer. But that next generation is very different. Like you look at Gen Z and even Gen Alpha is approaching, very different. If you haven't figured out Gen Alpha yet, it's too late, right? Like seriously, Tinder was behind the 8 ball when it came to Gen Z, and now we're definitely thinking about that. But I think to both of your points, like if you're going to do something and you're going to experiment, have a goal in mind, have a target, right? And you can run your experimentation, agile, whatever approach you want to call it, where you're doing your experimentation, you're learning from it iteratively, but you're focused on a goal, right? And a lot of times we see research organizations doing research for research, or they're producing results that nobody's listening to. So I think effective storytelling on top of that is important. What was your question?
Yeah. Actually, so maybe expanding on the storytelling piece, or kind of how do you pitch, right, AI, because or even CX for that matter, to decision makers in companies, right, where they're allocating resources. Like you're looking at it from the founder's standpoint, right? Are they leveraging the right technologies, probably for the right CX, et cetera? But Curtis, I know, our prep talks, you were talking about some techniques that you were able to use to sell to people, the decision makers or executives, the value of CX, let alone AI, right? And because sometimes that's not obvious.
No, it's not, especially with companies that are perhaps immature with their customer centricity, or their culture is growing, right? Like, so Tinder was a very product-led company. They had to learn the muscle memory of being more customer focused and challenging what that means. The approach that I took recently with Tinder was trying to provide, we provide data. I usually keep my decks really simple and boring, but it effectively is like to show them, give them the most first-person viewpoint to personify the data that you're showing them, the problems that you're showing them. So like customer journey workshops are a good way to do that. Cross-functionally, the way I design them is they're all cross-functional, so they involve everybody: design, engineering, product, analytics, everybody. And what we do is we get them together and we build context around a problem, around the users. They build their own personas. They're not very sophisticated, right? Because it's brainstorming. And then they go through the process of agreeing on what reality, what is this journey, and discovering the problems. We do a lot of research up front, identifying those. And then at the end, we kind of gamify how they talk about these problems, right? And then everything gets pitched back to executives who are seeing now unified teams around common cause or common problems with anticipated measurable results, right? And then the executives, they talk about it and they stack rank them. But on top of that is like customer interviews, moderated interviews. In my case, we recorded somebody swiping. I was doing a C-suite presentation on strategy, and clearly it wasn't landing. And I was like, all right, watch this, And I showed them the swipe experience for a free user on their first day, and it was god awful, And the entire C-suite, they're just in there with their mouths open. They're like, yeah, I don't know what you just said, but we got to fix that, right? Like, and so it's that and showing results. So every action by my team has an outcome, and that's how I measure success, is like, are we driving an outcome? Did we influence a decision? Did the product roadmap change? Did that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Kalyan, going back to you probably get a chance to work with a lot of different clients, right, around CX and around AI. Are there any patterns you're seeing as far as certain verticals, that are doing it better or ahead of other verticals, or certain laggard ones potentially? And I know you recently had a experience with your internet provider, your cable provider that you weren't happy with, right? We won't name the company. So what are some of the use cases or the enterprises that are implementing or leveraging AI or CX technologies, ably versus some that are not?
Are you going to tell us a story too?
Wait, aren't they a client?
Well, I think the travel and hospitality industry does a lot of good work in this field. And they are, they are right in the forefront of a domain of experience where a slight negative thing can become terrible for the brand. And there's a lot of competition, so brand loyalty is like super important. Unlike, say, healthcare, where you're not going to go to another doctor very soon, even if the experience sucks. But I didn't mention healthcare intentionally because I think healthcare does not do a good job of it. And both on the EX or the employee experience side and on the CX side, healthcare is really a stressed out industry, in my opinion. There are some leaders, people agree with me, but travel and hospitality is right up there. But in terms of, the big challenges are to really observe the customers, reactions and the experience. This is the frustration, and that comes back to what I had gone through with my internet provider, is that, and this is the age-old thing, it's not new. We've had it for like 20 years. You talk to a frontline agent and they don't know how many other agents you've talked to. They don't know the systems they have no knowledge of those systems, right? And even have an escalation to tier 2, those guys sometimes don't have a knowledge of all the systems. And you're just bounced. You're bounced from queue to queue, to systems to system, and you got ticket. I've got that particular incident. I got a stack of 7 tickets. Like 8 numbers, 7, it looks like a matrix to me. I'm an AI guy, so matrices are very good. I'm dreaming of those tickets nowadays. But that's the problem. And this is where AI can genuinely help and complement the human capability, because, the AI understands that there are these workflows. The issue is, how do you teach them? Because you can't teach them by observation. No one, if an AI observes a standard frontline or tier 2 experience, they don't learn a lot. So you have to have a way to, we used to call it in Microsoft, there was a company we acquired, and they were specialists in machine teaching. So you have to teach the AI. And a lot of people focus on learning, but what about the teachers? So there's a pedagogical aspect of it. And that is very underrepresented today. Anyway, long-winded answer, but I hope I've got a few points in.
So as the end user, are there solutions for that teaching aspect?
Actually not. There are not. In fact, this, I think, is a very good opportunity area for startups and founders and stuff like that. There are not good. I mean, you can, it's all easy to teach about tool interfaces. Everyone talks about agents. So yeah, just make tool interfaces. But you know what? There are like 200 tool interfaces in a big customer-facing company. So you make APIs out of them. You're just playing the old services game all over again. You've completely missed the AI point. So how do you teach not only the interfaces, but all the connected workflows and all the experiences over those workflows? It's like a layer cake. And there's no good solution to that today.
Mark, how many of your founders are working on this?
One of the things that we do at FTC is we try, like, the things in which that we, like, because part of my workflow is that probably in a month, I probably talk to probably about 50 startups or 50 entrepreneurs in a month. Out of those 50 startups, probably maybe one of them will be selected into our portfolio, in which that we will help them go through that process. One of the things that we did learn, though, from that is that there was a lot of information that was needed, and a lot of companies wanted to just be, well, I'm this AI company, I'm this AI company, and I'm like, okay, but what does your startup do? Like, outside of beyond the AI, who are you? And that's that's some of the things that we're seeing as it pertains to a massive struggle, of which we're getting to this precipice where I think that we're going to hit an inflection point within the startup community, as it pertains to, okay, we believe that AI is just a feature and it should be treated as such, not as the main product, unless you're building, because it begs to ask the question that, okay, hey, after we've trained all the AI models, well, then what? it really boils down to that question. After we've done all of X amount of training, after we've, trained it to oblivion, well, then what? Like, what's the next thing? Like, what are we deploying it to? What is it going to solve? And I was having this conversation with some of the folks at the table earlier, is that I think that we're coming close to that phase 1 of this AI journey, coming to a close, where you'll probably see a flush out within the market. And then essentially we get to see that next wave of some of the most amazing ideas that hit the market and flood it with, okay, now that we've done all this, okay, now we get to train. Now that we don't have to train anymore, now let's think beyond just the training. One of the things that we've learned is that we said, okay, hey, since we're getting all these startups, well, why don't we just build something in which that we can just use it to like vet company and essentially go through the due diligence process long before they even go look for venture funding. Those are the things in which, like, that's how we're looking at it, because we have to as a startup studio, where we have to pay attention to not only the customer experience, but then also looking at it from the standpoint of like, well, what does AI really do for the end user? How does it really create value from the first hand? I think that we also have to look at it from the standpoint of context. Really, what kind of context are we putting around it, in the sense of like, because hallucinations. I won't jump the gun because we're gonna get there. So we had an interesting conversation at the table where we said, like, here's a running joke. I was on X the other day, and there was a posting, and in the comment section of the post, everybody said, well, until Grok or Community Note says it, I'm just going to assume that it's AI. So, yeah.
But if I can pick up on one thing you said, Mark, I actively work to dissuade people to think AI is a feature. I think it's lifeblood. It's what flows into the veins, and it will become that at some point.
Yes.
And the problem today is that it's terribly transactional, because you think, you give it a prompt and you make a request and it comes back to you with an answer. And that's exactly the wrong way. Because what you really should be thinking is, it's, like in the days of Unix, we had a daemon process which never went to sleep. It was constantly there, observing, ingesting, assimilating, and intervening when needed. So that's one thing that these current set of AIs don't do well. You have reasoning models, and you have these nice normal models, very powerful, but they're still a question answer system, a question reaction system. But what about systems that are constantly watching? Those kinds of systems which can observe your company, observe your CX, and intervene at the right moment. It's only when you observe it continuously, then you can intervene at the right moment. Okay, now things are getting, escalated to a certain point when you need to intervene. That mindset, I think, needs to come in, rather than saying, this is a feature, it can totally do this and can automate that. No, I think it has to go a lot deeper than that.
Do you view it as a feature?
I'm chewing on that. I think I've been thinking a lot about architecture, right? Okay, and how we're going to quickly get to a point where AI is part of the full stack of the architecture, right? And even AI, like building product requirements documents, are starting to be a thing now, right? But so if I think about it, it's like, I had a neural network, I could do better pattern matching for my users, right? Matching people to potential mates. If I guess conversational AI would be something that I would be leveraging for the customer journey, because in my opinion, you should never have to type anything into an experience. It should just be a conversation. It starts with typing, and eventually we can get rid of that. And so the whole experience is effectively embedded, right? And so these models will start to react to your preferences, or what you're saying, or adjusting based on your mood or your tone. Maybe you're stressed out because you're a single parent and your kids won't go to bed, whatever is contributing to that. But so I guess in a way it's a feature, or it's visible as features, and in other ways, I suppose it's just the whole experience, and it shouldn't even be something where you're thinking, oh, I'm using AI. It's just part of it, you know. I lost the train of thought, but I had a question for you. Like, when you're thinking about, you're evaluating this business and you're thinking about using AI models to do that, I wonder if there's room for leveraging those same models to help train the people who are trying to build the models.
Absolutely.
You know, like a thought
Absolutely.
partner.
Yeah. So one of the things that we think about is like making the data transparent, because not only is it something that's for us, but it's also something for those founders in order for them to get better. So of course, we'd love for that. I think that the ultimate objective is, you know, where we would love for it to be is where it's proactive on its own. So essentially, you know, decisions can be made. Now it's like, okay, hey, you're getting this advisory. And then of course, advisory not only gives you advice and insights, but then also it gives you actionable related steps, and maybe in the future starts to act upon those steps. So of course, you know,
That'd be really cool.
that'd be really cool.
So we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I wanted to, I guess, understand. Maybe we can start with Curtis this time. What are the constraints that are slowing down adoption, right, or leveraging of AI technology in the right fashion, right? Because, and then the reason I thought of this is, but hallucination is something that I think everybody in the room knows is one of the risks or constraints, right, when it comes to, I guess, current version of AIs. So,
Yeah.
go ahead, Curtis.
Hallucination for sure. You know, the easy hallucination is asking, you know, I have a research repository and I'm like, hey, I got this one paper we're writing and I need 4 customer quotes loosely related to this, you know, and it just made them up, you know, like trust but verify, right? And so that's probably the easiest example of something like that. But the reason why, like, we're taking a measured approach to, oh, there you go, I can hear my voice now, sorry. The reason we're taking a measured approach with AI is impact, right? Is that the risk of harm to other users is very real, and we want to be extremely careful about how we manage this. So, like, in-person physical harm is a big one, right? And so, like, not prevalent, but a big impact problem. And so we don't necessarily want to have an AI moderating that contact because of obvious safety and security concerns. So, like, those are areas where we're being very careful. So we do have machine learning. We do have automation around bot and bad actor accounts and things like that. And that's the first line of defense. But we do have an appeals process that's largely managed manually, right? And the reason for that is we want to offer a very empathetic, caring response. And we also want to make sure we're not unintentionally harming someone. And so a huge factor for that is risk.
Got it.
What's the question again?
Let's solve this out.
Oh.
Don't want to answer.
No. I mean, okay. So one, I would say, like, from the builder's perspective, of course, you got to think about it from a risk standpoint. You know, also, like, who controls what data, like, you know, when you're building these things, you know, what has access to it. A lot of startups are out there building, you know, like, say, for example, if you build a financial startup and you build it upon, you know, OpenAI, you know, who controls that data? You know, when it's looking through and saying, let's say, for example, let's take wealth management, for example. And let's say that, you know, a person wants to build an AI tool for wealth management. Now I just given AI, like, pretty much access to my brokerage, my savings accounts, my checking accounts, and everything else. Well, okay. Well, what happens there? Like, who has like, do they control that? Do they keep that? Like, you know, is it secure? You know, what if there's a breach? What do those things look like? So that's one. The second thing is, I would probably say, is there, as much as, and I think that we, like, living in Washington State, I think that we're very much so privileged to being able to have access to the knowledge and the understanding But I think that there's a wide array of people out there here in this country that don't have access or don't understand AI, the fundamentals of it. How does it work? How does it have impacts on me? And so I think that that's a major part right there. Like, we do got to do better at educating communities, educating people, not only on just, the capabilities of what the AI can do and all the amazing things in which that we're probably going to experience and we're going to discover with it, but also in the sense of making sure that people have the pure basic foundations of understanding of how it works. So that way it becomes more equitable for everybody at the table to participate and to be able to, it's kind of like the same way where I think about it in finance, right? Once upon a time, people didn't have access to understanding, the stock market or anything like that. Well, come time around this beautiful thing called the internet that came about, and let's journey it to about 2015, 2018, where the information became more democratized, where people can now look it up, go on Google, and now with the dawning of like ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity, and whatever other tools, well, now this information is widely accessible, but it still doesn't mean that we still need financial advisors, we still need financial planners and everything else, but it's still just the understanding that, well, this is what it looks like when you see that the information has now become democratized and everybody has access. And I think that that's one of the things that we desperately need to make sure, because I think that without that, we're robbing ourselves of some of the coolest, craziest things that could probably hit the market that would be amazing and awesome that are just not being built. So I think that that's one of the major risks as it pertains to, like, if we look at it 5 to 10 years later down the road, and if we don't fix that problem.
So, I'll take a slightly different tack on this. And we started with hallucination. And for me, the issue is, I don't know if that's a symptom of the disease. And I have a lot of these symptoms, which sometimes people will come and say, that's the disease. You've got these models which are not grounded. And we've got this solution and to ground your model. And, people developed RAG and what have you and said, okay, now the model is grounded. But guess what? It was not. And this is like the early days of COVID, when you had symptoms which looked like a common cold and, flu and stuff like that, but you did not know whether there was something as like a virus that was causing it. And in the context of AI, it's that we don't know what these models are really doing. This is the first time, I think, in the history of mankind, we've got this rapidly spreading technology where even the godfathers, the real creators, they don't know what's going on under the hood. And that's the problem. So here's a celebrated problem that everyone in the practitioner community knows of. For a very long time, till GPT-4 and later, actually I think even the early O1 had this problem. It could not count the number of R's in strawberry. This is a well-known problem. It is the number of R's in strawberry. And you asked it that, and it would always say 2. It was very consistent. It is extremely consistent, but wrong. And no one knew why is it not being able to count that extra R after T and R. And that's because its tokenization would actually club T and R together in a way that it could not track. It has no understanding of counting. But, if that was simple, then we would treat it like, oh, well, it's a kindergarten little kid and it hasn't learned to count, so we'll teach it to count. But no one knew whether it was really counting or not. And that's a problem to a teacher, right? So fast forward, I think we've gotten over that problem, but every now and then we're going to have a problem that comes up, and then we have to scratch our heads and think, what's really happening? It's like a deeply, maybe a brilliant but crazy mind, and we have no idea what's going on inside that mind. Very little idea. Unless we solve that, now imagine the enterprise exec levels. You're going up to them and saying, let's implement this. This is, this is a real cool thing. But then you say, okay, how does it work? And you really don't know. To me, that's the meta problem. That's the underlying problem. We have to solve that in some way before we can say, okay, now we have guarantees. We have certified solutions. And then this whole apparatus that made services, architectures, and the internet so powerful can swing into its normal motion, because now you have compliance, you have guarantees, you have audits, you have all this stuff, which is now actually just sitting in the sideline and saying, okay, when do we start our work? You see what I'm saying?
Can I ask a question? Do you guys think that tokenization within like AI is going to take a lot of companies under? Like, for example, like a lot of the business models are very tokenized. Like, I wanted to know what your thoughts are. Like, so say, for example, if I'm paying, like, let's say X amount of dollars for X amount of tokens. Now, as the technology gets better, and also as, say, for example, we get more advanced, does that bring the cost down as it pertains to the tokenization?
It does. I mean, though I think we're talking about two different things. They're talking about the economics.
Yeah, the economics.
And I'm talking about the kind of semantics of economics.
Yep.
Right. But economically, it's just constantly coming down, because now there's some very standard and very well kind of adopted ways for tokenization.
Yep.
And all of these big models adopt those things. And what they're doing is that cost per token is constantly coming down. Till it was coming down till you hit this reasoning model.
Yep.
This inference time scaling, because this might be a little bit for specialists, but one of the godfathers like Ilya Sutskever came up in November and said, pre-training is dead. I mean, you've squeezed as much of intelligence out of models in pre-training, so now it's all about what do you do after the training cycle is stopped. And then people came out, hey, you know what, you can scale it at inference time, give it more resources. So now the token budgets are expanding, and it's a little crazy because a lot of these models, they explore every possible path, and that adds to your bottom line, right? So right now it's going up again, but it was in a very comfortable downward. So much so that, Microsoft and OpenAI, they announced, we're going to charge some crazy $20,000 per a seat.
Yep.
That's nonsense, but because they don't know how to control that cost. They're incurring that cost right now.
That's an interesting question. So I'm just running the knob. I'm like, with every exponential increase in computing power, right? You're going to wind up with the same problem. So eventually, something needs to happen with the cost model.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good.
Because let's say you have a profit margin of 85%, and then essentially like.
But the frustrating thing is that this little noggin has about 40 watts of power charging inside it, and how does it do it?
Cheap energy, right? No, that's a really good point. And the semantic point you were making was equally fascinating. Like, I was around for the .com boom, right? Like, computing made total sense, right? You could, test-driven development, you could do all kinds of things to figure out why something isn't working. And this is a much more complicated problem to decipher, especially if you don't understand how it works.
All these may be related, right? So you're saying that you could potentially adopt AI faster if there was a safer way to do it, right? In your context.
Yes.
And then you're saying that we don't understand it enough to be able to come up with that, right? But then the accessibility problem is slightly different, right? That's a societal or policy issue, or some of it is at least, right? So I guess for most of us, we're operating within our contexts, right? If you're working within an enterprise. So, but ultimately, why should we adopt AI faster? I guess you'd probably all agree that otherwise we'll be left behind the competition if you don't, right? Is there any controversy or contrarian answer to that?
I think anyone here at least would say, contrary to that, but I think strategically you have two options, and I think you have to do both in parallel. One is there has to be a deep experimentation group in every company, because what really works and what are the limits of acceptability and security and risk, that's a threshold which every company has to set for itself, and you have to experiment within that. And the second thing is that the pilot and the production deployments have to be in a very narrowly circumscribed domain, and you have to have this entirely new discipline of evals. And this is something like the old notion of testing, but evals is, all levels of, pseudo customers, even other LLMs, judging and assessing the quality and the the accuracy of the outputs in that narrow domain. So I think both have to be done together, and we are in an early stage, and it's like any other great technology, we have to be used to that, get used to that motion.
100%. And experimentation, like there are fewer companies around than I think people realize that are actually good at failing fast and experimenting. Like a lot of companies, Tinder as well, we'll go and we'll run an experiment and we'll launch something and it won't work, or it'll have a corresponding negative impact somewhere else to the business, which is another risk with going fast. But the thing is asking why did it fail? Why did that implementation fail? And then really dialing down your approach to experimentation in a way that minimizes the business impact, is especially now is super important. It's something we need to get better at too.
I guess we've discussed several points. Any summaries to offer before we get into the audience Q&A with regards to, key aspects?
We should ask an AI to summarize.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, I guess since we have you, can you do slightly better?
40 watts checking at the 42.
He did summarize
the paper. Well, I think, there's been many topics here. I think if I strike a kind of a end note on this discussion, it's that we are in an early stage of a very powerful technology. We have to have a lot of risk tolerance and a lot of risk fences. Yep. And in fact, a kind of an institutionalized risk capital function inside of a enterprise. Folks like you do it outside in the broader economy. I think we need to have that inside of
I think if you're, especially on the enterprise level, if you're not making the type of an investment, even in the sense of like I said, where I gave the example of NVIDIA, where they failed in the crypto market, which was huge for AMD, which bolstered them. But then essentially taking that failure fast and then being able to reinvest and retool and create something beautiful. I think that's something that all enterprise businesses should be doing. So the question that you should be asking yourself is, especially if you're an enterprise, why aren't we, making that investment? Why are we not? Are we only thinking about it 6 to 12 months down the line? Are we just trying to make sure that we just continually have a great quarter? Or essentially, are we thinking about it over, instead of just, over the next 6 to 12 months, are we looking at it over the next, 3 years? What does that look like? How does that transform our business? Will that be the transformation of our business? Or will it be, the Grim Reaper knocking on our door and we look back and say, well, we didn't make this investment, we didn't make that investment, we didn't make this. And that was ultimately the kiss of death towards, our business. So I think that's something that, is very key. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Curtis.
And also try to avoid fragmented implementations, right? You don't need 30 different kinds of AI programs to figure out what to do, what the right thing to do is, right? Make sure that you have line of sight on what it is you're trying to accomplish and just start working on it. Part of the problem also is resources, all of the smart kids, who know, my 18-year-old knows more about it. God, he drives, he was 12 and he moderated a 3,000 person, before. I was just what is going on? Oh yeah. But I mean, as a company, you're not just investing in the tech, you're investing in the people. And if you have to entice these young minds to start coming into your organization and working on these problems, is huge because the learning curve is nuts,
Thank you. So if anybody has any questions, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so you touched on it a little bit regarding tokenization of essentially the database data set that's within an AI will not know that this data is bad and this data is good. And obviously, one of the unique values of tokenization is you're able to essentially apply those timescales. But like you said, if we do it in a proof of work environment, it'll be the most expensive thing just to run that model that nobody will pay for. So how do we solve what is clearly hitting, essentially, we're seeing the AI trend hitting with the crypto trend in ways that a lot of people said from early on and screamed it, but most people were like, no, that's not going to come. How do we navigate, essentially, these convergence of hot topics that have real technical hurdles that need to get done? And how do we make sure that those technical hurdles are not thrown to the side because they're inconvenient for our narratives?
So
Okay, so I think I'm going to say something that's probably going to be controversial. I think that probably
Well, 3 cameras. Go ahead.
I think that what we see as it pertains to platforms like a Cursor, the ones that use the tokenization, I think that they're probably going to go to, I think they're where they start off at, like as I mentioned, 85% profit margin. I think that they're probably going to go to 0. And I think the reason why I believe that is because just like as you explained it, and then on top of that, when we get to a point where it's just not the value base is ultimately going to fall out from underneath, I think that that's going to create a massive problem. That essentially where it's going to be, okay, everybody's looking around and says, who picks up this bill? Do you put this bill on, say, for example, the founder that's building such an idea or using it to build such platforms, or do you put this on the base company? And I think that the base companies that use that tokenization process, I think that they're going to be in the world of hurt. And I don't have the answer to it yet. To be honest, I don't, because it's more so I think that we're such in the early innings of it. But I do believe that we will probably see that we're going to start seeing first the compression of profit margins. And then from profit margins, like you had mentioned, that there's going to have to be another leg or another tentacle, and we're going to see if that tentacle sticks. And when it doesn't, well, then I think that that's the real trouble.
the only thing I'll add on to that is that I think economists will have to think about factor pricing here, because we don't know what the factors of this particular production apparatus is. Tokens is an easy one, and that pertains to data, but then you've got weights, and you've got algorithms over it, and now there's a whole full stack of agents and LLM workflows and stuff like that. So what is the unit that you price to make this an economically meaningful marketplace? I think we started with the simplest and the most obvious one, which worked for some time. But the problem is all of these layers are getting devalued very fast. For example, data. We pretty much run out of data. The frontier models have digested every bit of internet data. So now you have to start digesting, you have to create synthetic data. When you start creating synthetic data, what's the marginal value of an extra byte of data, right? That becomes a...
With the counterpacts of the biases that are really effective.
Exactly. And then you look at other economies other than the so-called westernized first world, and those economies are trying to catch the wave of, vernacular data sets, which are not, these models have not been trained on. So they're arbitraging that stuff. So I think what's happening is that what is the factor production costs as a pricing model of what goes into the final price. That economic model, I'm sure, is going to morph and evolve quite a bit.
Another question? Nobody else? Go ahead, Brian.
I was wondering if each of you could share an example of a customer experience challenge you had that AI solved or revolutionized for you. Some way for us to kind of set in context kind of our customer service, or not customer service, but customer experience strategy, how we might use AI to
So I'll go off of the example that I gave earlier, where since we deal with so many startups that come into our door that are looking for, to join our portfolio, we had to get better because of the fact is like, time spent on listening to pitches, time spent listening to ideas and everything else, versus time spending building, helping companies grow, helping them go to market, helping them ultimately go through that process of fundraising. It's just too much. So we had to think about it from a different lens and say, okay, hey, well, let's utilize AI in the sense of helping us get a better jump on what is it that's being presented in front of us. So now we probably have, like, at any point in time, we probably have like 25 companies coming in where we're running it through our product, and pretty much it's able to tell us like, okay, hey, well, is this project viable? And why is it not viable? What are the things that it needs to improve in order to make it viable? What are some of the insights that you see? For example, if we're looking at market opportunity, is there something wrong with its TAM, SAM, SUM? Is it too small, or is it, and then when we look at it from the sense of, well, also examining the founders, looking at what is it that they've recently done, previous work. Those are the things that we literally built in to literally allow us to do that early due diligence before we even say yes to a startup. And the beautiful thing about it is like it's something cool because we get to eat our own dog food, but then probably next thing you know, it turns it around for us as a firm where we say, okay, hey, well, what if we put this into the hands of venture capitalists and saying, okay, hey, well, what if you had these tools? Because technically the due diligence and vetting process takes about 4 to 8 weeks before a company even gets their first check. So how do we improve that? So that's ultimately something for us that's revolutionary within FTC, where we look at it and say, okay, hey, this actually has legs here. And we learned it just from solving a problem that was really like it was literally paralyzing our firm from being able to move forward. So
Let me give a little bit context. That's really interesting. I think in your context, Brian is at Community Transit, and some of you know what that is, right? Which is the, I guess, community transit up in Snohomish County, right? So any examples, I guess, that would be concrete as far as before and after scenario of where you applied AI and it improved CX significantly?
Well, we did a pilot project with a travel and hospitality provider. Actually, it was a partnership between an airlines and a hotel chain, where the interesting thing was the concept of listening posts. And most of these companies, in the traditional sense, they have the feedback mechanisms which are highly structured and very predictable, right? You get a survey, or you do. It's a very reactive. It's usually after the fact, and most people hate it. But if you're in a business where customers are interacting at physical touch points, digital touch points, and human touch points, all of them, you have to have a completely different strategy. You have to have physical listening posts when people are actually interacting with a pay machine or a kiosk or ordering a drink through a menu or whatever. You have to have a digital touch point, which is through the website or a chat agent. And when they're maybe talking to a human frontline agent, you have to have a listening post there. When we did that, we realized that the real problem was stringing this together, because there's services infrastructure already has telemetry and observational traces that can chain together. But we needed the notion of semantic observability. What is the semantics of each interaction from the customer's point of view and from the business point of view? And when we did this pilot, the insight was just insane, because we realized that every customer is going through a pretty, consistent set of touch points. And based on whatever we can capture at that touch point, we get a really crystallized idea of what that customer felt, satisfied, dissatisfied, what was the effort spent, what was the time spent, and we could predict a lot of future patterns of behavior, right? So I think that would be one thing.
I was going to say, you got the best example over here about the experience.
remember the experiences it pertains to people, like when I asked, what is the experience like for you at Tinder? And then how do you get that? Like, what is it that they're constantly asking you in the feedback that they get? And how is it you guys?
Oh yeah, I get a lot of LinkedIn messages, people trying to get me to help them with unlocking their accounts. And my first response is, you do realize I'm going to look at your account, or have someone do it, and then they go away. Except every once in a while. So there's so much. I was trying to think about an example that I could speak publicly about. We have circuitous loops with the LGBTQIA plus community. These people tend to get reported a lot, and bots and bad actors will mimic these accounts for nefarious reasons. It's like a target market, And so what happens is really good, bona fide, normal, regular people are getting stuck in being shadow banned and then banned, and then they contact us, and then a machine responds, and and so we did a lot. We leveraged a lot of machine learning actually, just to go through and try to understand if we could suss out if there were patterns between human beings and bots, and they're very similar. And so we did a journey map for trust and safety, and watched the entire process, and then leveraged a lot of that data, and came up with better, improved ML models that helped reduce that. I still get pinged every once in a while, but I'm trying to think about another one. Okay, so in a user interface, right? You go into a dating profile. I don't know, maybe you go into a dating profile and you set up your account. One thing we know is the higher quality the information is in a profile, the higher quality the ecosystem becomes, because then people are getting matched to what you put in there. So less information makes for bad quality and really mad people. And so we couldn't figure out how to get people to fill these out right, because it's boring. There's that. And then the other thing is that there's the image that you want to protect, like your Instagram image, and then there's the image of who you are as a real person. And then understanding the difference between like a preference and a value, right? So a preference is pineapple on pizza, and a value is I'm Christian, would be one, right? Those are not the same. And so what happens quite often is the matching algorithms get kind of messed up with that, right? Because they don't have a really good weighting system. And so we started implementing, we did a proof of kind of, I guess it's a beta of something called Taylor, where that experience is more conversational and we give people options, right? And so we started to dive into what's the difference between a value and a preference, and then started updating our matching algorithms to improve that. Wow, that word hurt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Vijay.
What about compliance legislation? I think of my industry of talent acquisition. There's so many AI tools, and they're all going to be gone tomorrow because they're just a feature. But they're in for pretty fun. They're making it. But I worry about New York has certain legislation, California does. So yeah, is there an AI council out there? Like how startups deal with how do you what's around that?
I mean, one, that would be a phenomenal idea. So if you are thinking about building it, build it. It's kind of interesting because we're in that place of like, we're asking ourselves the questions like, I think Gen Z, I think the best example that I can give is like once upon a time, baby boomers were like, okay, hey, how do I get to the money? And then, Gen Xers were like, okay, hey, how do I make money? And then Gen Z is asking the question, what is money? And I think that's in Gen Alpha. I flag on the play. I don't know. But the reason why I ask that is because, when we think about it in today's landscape, in today's eyes, we really need to start asking that question, what is compliance in the next 5 years, 10 years, 3 years? you're already seeing cases in the sense where people that work in legal are using AI to put together their entire arguments, their entire process. Yeah. So, and I tend to find that like when we think about like legislation and when we think about policy, policy comes after innovation. Innovation goes first, and then I tend to find that policy is always so slow to catch up, and many times doesn't even catch up until the industry itself has already been dictated. Like for example, when we look at AI today, and we sit back and ask ourselves, okay, the creators of all these wonderful tools that we see right now, when it comes time to writing the rules, right? Who's going to write them? Are you going to have the folks in which that were the massive players that literally built the infrastructure write the rules? Or are you going to go independent party? Like, for example, like I remember back when we saw like the CEO of Google, the CEO of Meta, and a few other CEOs that were sitting on Capitol Hill, and they were all being pressed by Congress. And I kind of asked the question, how hard am I going to press the person that that knows my search history? Like how pressing of a question am I going to ask you? So I guess the reason why I say that is because, I don't, and it's crazy because my wife works in HR, so this is very interesting. But having a conversation with her, she said that most of your HR departments are like pretty much, they're probably already using AI when they shouldn't. And they're probably already using, so they're probably breaking all the rules. Exactly. So I think that we're at that precipice where we're probably going to find someone that literally reinvents what HR looks like. And we're already starting to see pieces of it, but I think that we're on that road where we're going to look at compliance. I mean, it's easy for somebody to just like literally create some agentic platform to say, okay, hey, like look at take into consideration where a person's jurisdiction is or where they currently are, and ultimately apply, say, for example, X amount of rules to ultimately build such things so that way we're compliant. But I think those rules are probably going to be broken and somebody's going to create something pretty interesting that's going to disrupt.
And the big four audit firms, their heads must be exploding right now.
That's a fact.
We're good. Sorry. One comment. Okay.
Brief.
Real brief. I think in place of policy, I agree, because until you build it, right? In place of policy, we should probably start with ethics, and really have a good grounding in ethics before building.
Quickly, the problem I have with compliance is not that, I think it's absolutely essentially it's needed, but what I worry about is gaming. And AI can game almost every rule it can put it out of the water, and that's the first thing that we have to worry about. That you put in a set of rules, you think everyone's going to follow it. AI will not follow it because they'll interpret it in line with their what we call the reward function. And there was a brilliant paper from Anthropic a few months back. It's called alignment faking. You can look it up. And alignment is the way that we try to ensure that the AI is aligned with our values and our likings and preferences. But this AI was actually trying to fake that alignment. It's not a problem if someone tries to, if someone actually does not comply with an alignment criteria. But if someone fakes that alignment, then you have a problem, which every teacher would know in a classroom. Some kids are really sharp. They can fake something, as opposed to some people are just disobedient, then break the rule. And that's easier to tackle. I think that problem we have to face at some point.
Last question. I guess we'll have two then. Ashwin, go ahead.
We do. Not in every aspect for security reasons. But we had a lot of, so with the Taylor Lodge, we did a lot of moderated interview, both on like assist of concepts and understanding of the action, but also interviewing one question about how do they feel about an AI model? Asking questions you read the same about the helping your questions, and very regional, very generational. So younger people were more concerned about their privacy, but they were more open to the fun, the experience that we were providing. Older generations were a little less inclined, and not a very rough. It's about very I was talking to somebody who mentioned he can help their AI. They talk to users, and one of the things that he said was that the very elderly are actually very receptive to AI, like a AI agent checking in on you. Hey, how are those meds? Like how's that? They're actually very receptive to that. So I think it's generational. Europe, people are very, very concerned about privacy. So I haven't had that much exposure there.
That's wild, but there's cameras on every block. But
Right?
Well, I talk all the time. At the C-suite, the dialogue and interest is different from people who want to implement it. At the C-suite, three things kind of stand out for me. One is pricing. How do you determine the price of the AI service? Second thing is ownership. It's very clear who owns the data. The brand owns the data. Who owns the models? And third thing is accountability. You do something terrible, your AI does something silly, and the brand suffers as a result. Who takes the accountability, and is there an indemnity clause that kind of limits the exposure for that? So three things, and really these are conversations that are, again, dynamic because there are no rules in this new world, but those are very important considerations.
ditto to what he said, except that when you're dealing with founders, let's build some shit.
Yeah.
Quick question. I'm curious to what the adoption of AI is within small businesses, right? The trust factor of AI, the security, et cetera, of AI. Is it an issue right now? I'm a Generation Xer. I'm Generation X, so I am skeptical, right? And so, I'd like to know just if you've seen it, if you have any data around that.
Yeah. So for me, my boss was a baby boomer. My final boss that I've ever had in life, he was a baby boomer, and civil engineering and construction management firm. And I remember back in the time when we were talking about automation within the process, and he was not with it. But what I did was I slowly started to integrate things. And then the more that I started to integrate it into his workflow, he was like, oh, well, this is great. And he didn't he realized okay, this is making me move a lot faster, do X, Y, Z. I think it varies based upon small business. It depends upon the sensitivity of the data in which that you do business. If you're in a highly sensitive arena in which that the data that you use, for example, the data on customers, let's say you're working on, city-based docs, or you're working on a project that's, with Sound Transit or anything like that. I think that a lot of those businesses, they're probably already integrating AI into their workflow. Now, let's say if you're a small, say, for example, practice as it pertains to health, probably not. You're probably not going to be receptive of it. So I think it varies across the board. One, it's defined by workflow. Two, sensitivity as it pertains to the nature of the business and the nature of the data of that business. And then three, I think the other part is the difficulty of adoption also. What I tend to find among small businesses are, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And then you have a very small percentage of folks that are willing to take the chance and say, okay, hey, well, let's go ahead and try to integrate this into workflow. So again, it varies across the entire board.
We actually have a little bit more time, so if you have one or two more questions, time.
I would say yes and no.
Maybe. Below to quit.
And I think the reason why I say that is because, you know, when we think about security, like the security is only as good as one. If you're building it, it's only as good as you build it, or as good as, say, for example, someone has built it for you. And then two, yeah, that's so loaded.
I think the math is different, kind of, between leveraging a vendor for a product or a feature set and building something in-house, right? And the risks are different, you know, but when it comes to like leakage or something very public that's going to hurt your reputation, then I would say the biggest concern is with vendors. Yeah.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. Yeah, I actually think it's been top of mind. I think that's actually something that would be amazing and beautiful, and I think it's within reach. Like, you know, session replay. We were talking about this. I was exposed to it a couple of years ago, but we weren't able to adopt it. And I think if you're looking for that first person and the ability to marry an experience to a bunch of different data points, if you have a platform that's available that's very scalable, then yes. And I think there's value in the arts and crafts approach to journey workshops. My approach is now like also digitized, right? But it's still a crafts project, right? And that hands-on experience of arguing about something and being right there in person and discussing cost, complexity, and value, right, that you're getting is all very important. But I think you can set the stage at least with the process of building that understanding of the journey and shorten how much time it takes to come up with the arts and crafts project.
Yes, I'd ask this question to Kalyan and from Platform
Say
Central.
one more thing to that. And, a lot of people think of this in terms of automation. That's the lowest tier of value. We shouldn't be thinking about automation as AI's value add to CX. I think what really adds value is decisions, that is autonomy and design. And very often the next two tiers are not thought of really deeply. But that's where it sparkles. So, I would just say that.
Okay. Andy, and then Eric.
So I have kind of first question to the group. How many people use AI on a daily basis? So I think we're looking at a subsection of a room that's highly engaged into AI. Yep. And I think we tend to have already accepted that our privacy is out the door. Yep. And we're fine with that.
He's struggling with it over here. You're not gonna win. How many of you actually delete your memories in Chat GPT? Oh, okay.
He's the only one in cybersecurity in the room.
Is it a weekly? Is it a weekly wipe or a daily wipe?
It is on weekly wipe.
Yep.
Because we go back to the 15.
Yep.
But you should ask ChatGPT, who am I?
Who am I?
That is really cool.
Yeah.
When I asked, it was after 6 months.
Aaron, go ahead.
Oh, hey, that's real. That's real.
It's like, so the people will use like very like a yes person type profile, but you can, as amazing as these models are and continue to improve, you can change that default model. If you haven't already, I would urge you to ask it to create an objective coach mode or something that actually helps add value to you. And these meta conversations that people like here are starting to have is something I found extremely helpful. And coming back to one of the things that we talked about before about the accessibility of AI, I'm going to get to the question. I think our species, and I'll just touch on something very quickly here. So I heard some concerns about not knowing what's going on inside AI. It's like a bit of a black box. I think because of the market forces, everyone here is using it and is going to continue to use it regardless of how it's working internally, implementation-wise. I think it would be good to just reach acceptance as soon as possible that we are the hungry caterpillar, consuming resources, and AGI is the butterfly that will supersede us. But in the meantime, let's pay our kids' college tuition fees. And what I would suggest is maximizing the use of it and the availability of it as well. And the question I'm going to get is, right now there's a lot of GPU-based inference that's going on, right? And I'm curious as to something that can maybe help many people here. Which technologies and stocks should we keep an eye on and monitor?
Should I?
Potentially, using analog-based or MPUs or ASICs or other technologies. Because I'm not a crypto bro. I'm not a big fan of using Sudoku to consume a lot of energy. But I would like to see AGI or inference for not the compute, but the work that's needed to perform that function. I'm being very careful to not talk about CPU, GPU here, but the work that's needed to provide a response, provide value to customers. What are the technologies that we use? And is that something that can, similar to electricity, similar to internet, can become a commodity? Maybe it can even power my house or heat my house as like a residual, right? But does the raw inference become something that's on some form of silicon that is actually operated by PSC utility? Again, my question is, what stocks am I buying?
This is an optional question, by the way.
I was gonna say somebody must have watched the
You're
Come Up
not
series.
mandated to respond. It's a
Disclaimer: I am not a financial advisor. Anything that I tell you is my thoughts and my thoughts alone. And anything that I say, you should definitely do your own due diligence. And also, yeah, there's your disclaimer. So, I know that we don't want to go towards the chip sector as it pertains to like CPU, GPU, but let's start there. And the reason why is because there's a reason why NVIDIA has, like, sentiment-wise and also market-wise, has surpassed Apple as probably the most valuable as it pertains to market cap. And of course, we could look at it as it pertains to what are the things that Apple is not doing. It's slow to the AI race and everything else. But the interesting thing that what we look at is not only the GPU that they built, but it's the software that is the second moat that surrounds NVIDIA. Like, not only did they build the GPU that powers a lot of the devices in the data centers, but think about it, they also provided the Omniverse software for the developer community to test a lot of those models and also to be able to test a lot of those technologies and build products on those things. to which a lot of enterprise-based clients ultimately utilize, whether it's for digital twin. When you think about like NVIDIA Drive being in Mercedes cars and essentially using that data to like literally recreate the entire world that the car just saw in digital form. That's something in which that when you think about, when you look at the next person or the next company, that's the next person up, you look around and it's like, oh, well, they're kind of ahead by a mile in comparison to others. Now, there's other companies out there that do some of the same things, what they do, but when you think about it as it pertains to just leader, you probably have NVIDIA, and it's probably like NVIDIA's world right now, and everybody else is paying rent. I think that when we look at also, like, I mean, outside of just looking at the chip sector, you really need to look at some of the companies, like, for example, look at how many acquisitions Salesforce has bought. And then also what's going to look even more scary, go look at how many AI companies they've acquired. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Meta as it pertains to what they're doing. I'd be remiss also if I didn't mention Adobe as it pertains to what they're doing. They're not just, say, for example, for creatives, but how they've moved into the sales, arena. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a Microsoft, in which that ultimately, cloud service provider, enterprise-based solutions. And the beautiful thing I love about what they do is they go and listen to the customers. They literally go and talk to their customer base. And then essentially I think they also use the AI to also be able to look at using business intelligence and to say, okay, hey, well, let's create these solutions. But that's partly with AI doing that. I could go off on a bunch of them, but
Maybe afterwards.
maybe afterwards.
I'm curious, Kalyan, your thoughts on this?
He said what? Okay.
Go ahead, Kalyan.
So I don't know how disruptive this is, but I'll tell you three areas where there's a lot of attention in the practitioner or research communities. One is synthetic data, because we've run out of data. There's model collapse going on, model trained on other models and all that stuff. So people and companies which can crack the good data sources on a synthetic basis, that's a big disruptor. Second disruptor is the study of quantized models, which is essentially compressing models into extremely low bit factors and being able to deploy them in almost every way faster inference, etc. And that might actually be a big blow to NVIDIA's GPU dominance. And the third thing is a really emerging area of quantum machine learning. And this is essentially the idea that even with small quantum systems with, like 16 qubits or 20 qubits, you can run, a huge workload of training on a 20 qubit system, which some of these are available actually. and they are very disruptive because they can completely reset this thing, which is why, interestingly, Jensen said something very negative about quantum, and 6 months later, he's actually said something very positive. He's actually buying quantum now.
I think we'll have to end it here. If you have thoughts or questions afterwards, we have the room for about half an hour more. I think there's probably some food and the bar will be there. So big thank you to all three of you. And thanks to all of you for showing up. We'll do this another time in about 3 months. You'll hear about it somehow, right, Gucci and Cece? Cece's gone. Okay, thank you. Good evening.